it on a no goldfish.
I don't think city should give them away as prize up tonight.
Good evening and welcome to the October 12th, 2021 Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District Board of Managers meeting. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Steve?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. So our next item on the agenda is the public comment period. Is there anybody in the chambers that would like to speak at the public comment period this evening? Going once, twice, seeing none, then I would we will move on to approval of the agenda. Joni, were there any changes to the agenda from a staff perspective?
President Meiser, no, there is no suggested changes.
How about from my colleagues? Any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
So moved, or second.
We have a motion second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 5-0. Thanks, everybody. So now we're on to our other old and new business, and our first item is our typical programs and projects update.
On September 25th, we had our Clean Water Cleanup, which was a stenciling event. Around 40 volunteers contributed to over a total of 100 drains stenciled. We have the stenciling kits for future use. Overall, it was a successful event. Prior lake level remains very low, 900.55, Spring Lake 909.69. Any reason why the water is lowering is likely due to evaporation. Cart management continues. One of the bigger ticket items over the last month was installing 4 new radio tags on Upper Pryor and 5 new radio tags on Spring Lake. The Tadpole Pond barrier is projected to be installed tomorrow. Along with the radio tagging, we're updating our CPUE estimates, which is ultimately what we estimate the total poundage and quantities of fish in our lakes.
Okay, and for our boat inspections, as you can imagine, it was a little bit slower being in September. We did not do any inspections on Fish Lake, but we had 215 inspections on Lower, Upper, and Spring, and there were no AIS found on any boats entering or exiting. We did have some calls from landowners or lakeshore owners that were wondering what to do with their boats that were that have been on the lake all year, and they knew there might be some zebra mussels attached to the boat. So the inspector gave permits to some of those boat owners, knowing that they were going to bring their boat just to storage and that they weren't going to bring them to any other lakes. So they allowed them to do that. And eyelids also a little bit slower over there too, but not really a whole lot to report. Still just a lot of people looking at the eyelids unit is what we're really after. So we will be analyzing this program before the end of the year, and we will have the owner of the company come to give an annual report of what we found over the year as well, and he'll be providing a report, but staff will be putting together kind of recommendations and observations from the year and what we think we should do for next year, whether we should continue the program or not.
There was no sign of any vandalism or any people messing around with the eyelids unit?
No, we haven't had any vandalism or any issues.
And as far as the boat inspections, when does that end? Has it ended? When will it end?
I believe it's the end of October is what
End
the
of October.
contract stated.
Okay, thank you.
I would have to double check that for sure. It's 6 months total is what the contract was, so from whenever that started, I can't remember the exact date.
Jamie, a question on eyelids. 793 videos reviewed, but 130 launches. Why are there so many more videos reviewed than launches? I'm a numbers person.
Right, yeah. So the camera is set up, it's programmed so that when it has metal and motion, it'll record. So sometimes people will drive by but not actually launch their boat. Or if you can imagine when they pull forward, that would trigger a video. And then when they back up, that would be another video. So that's just kind of the percentage of the videos that are actually launching into the lake.
Okay, thank you.
Kurt?
Did the audio get turned up on the unit? Because the last time I listened to it, you had to be about 2 feet from it in order to hear anything.
Yes, we did increase the audio. I believe that was about 2 months ago. So if you
Yeah.
think it was after that, we might need to increase it
You turned
more.
it up? Okay.
Do you remember when you were out there? It was probably a month and a half. Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, we're going to go ahead. Bruce?
Yes, I have a question on the CARP management program. It talks about begin planning for the 2022 CARP management program. I mean, I think the last meeting we saw the plan, right? We saw the plan for 2022. So now are you planning, I mean, when you say planning, are you implementing the plan, or what are you actually doing with planning?
Currently, so the current last month's activities were still performed under this current year's plan with the radio tags.
Mm-hmm.
Can you clarify what you, moving forward, what you mean by that?
Yeah, so 2022, you said you're going to begin planning for 2022.
That's the fourth bullet on the update, Jeff, states that you're going to continue
I'm assuming
or
we
begin
have a plan.
planning for next year, but we thought we just approved the plan, so I think that's what he's trying to
Are you implementing the
clarify.
plan we approved, or planning?
To clarify, that's figuring out what we want to do with how we might use WSB
Okay.
and what type of activities we want to use them for, or how we're going to implement those IPM goals.
Okay.
Yeah, Manager Loney, if I could just, the plan that you saw last month is a larger, broader sort of approach of how we're going to, manage the whole integrated pest management.
Great.
And now Jeff is now looking at that broader plan and deciding what are the specific actions that he is going to do in 2022.
So we're getting into the nitty-gritty of details and activities.
That's correct.
Okay. And then on the feasibility report of this iron sand filter west of County Roads, we keep exploring the location. I don't know if it's to Carl or to Jamie, or, I mean, are we having a hard time finding a spot, a property owner that'd be cooperative, or?
For the Sutton Lake Iron Enhance, no, the
Spring Lake
Spring
West.
West.
Spring Lake West.
Yeah, so if you recall, our ideal location was located on the east side of Marshall Road, and we had started planning with that landowner, and then they stopped communicating with Maggie, and I actually did get confirmation that Paul Kruger talked to him since then, and he told Paul Kruger that he doesn't want to do the project. So then we are looking at on Paul Kruger's property, and EOR had written up a draft feasibility that had some concept plans in it. And after they saw those plans, Tim Kruger, the land farmer, had an idea for another location that he thought would be more ideal for their farming practices. Is that, and I'm going to ask Carl for confirmation, is that right?
Yeah, that's fair characterization. The
Okay.
feasibility report right now has 7 viable locations that are really just.
Carl, can you get closer to the mic,
Yep,
please?
the draft feasibility has 7 viable locations, and it's really about landowner negotiations and acceptance.
Well, that's good to hear. That's the first I've heard that there are that many options. That's very good to hear.
So it sounds like we're getting closer to a site.
Yeah, so Carl is going to draw up one more option for this filter, and then our plan is to give you the draft feasibility study at next month's board meeting, so you'll be able to review those at that time.
And it's going to be on the west side of 17 now? Or on the
Yes.
east side? West side,
Yep,
okay. And the completion date is in 2022?
feasibility, the grant is due at the end of the year, so we have to just complete the report by December 31st. So the report will just include all of the options that we've drawn up. And then we will probably recommend 1 or 2 of the most feasible locations. But then the next step will come later on if we were to get a grant for the project to actually move forward with construction and stuff. So right now, it's just the feasibility report that we're completing.
Yeah, thank you for the update, that's all.
Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to the next item then, Scott County Lidar funding request. Joni.
Mr. President and managers. So the state of Minnesota is partnering with the USGS to do a complete collection of data of LiDAR, which is 3D data, which is very detailed and very helpful data. So they're developing a whole data set across the state. And we use LiDAR data very frequently. Just last week, I was looking at a wetland delineation report that our consultants was referencing LiDAR data that they were using to help with their assessment. So the state of Minnesota then reached out to all the counties and asked that they would help contribute to the cost of this project. And Scott County has committed $58,000 to the collection of this LiDAR data. The county then, in turn, is now requesting that some of the watershed management organizations within the county consider making a contribution as well to this effort. So the Scott WMO has already agreed to commit $20,000 to the effort, and Scott County is making the request from a dollar standpoint that the Lower Minnesota River Watershed District and Prior Lake Spring Lake Watershed District each consider contributing $5,000 towards the study. So once again, this is data that would definitely benefit the district. Our consultants use it all the time. The county, there are other people who are also contributing to the data that we use on a daily basis. On an annual basis, the cities pay for aerial photography that we look at, and they contribute, I believe, $2,500 on an annual basis for that aerial photography. In addition, Scott County is also planning to update the planimetric data across the county, and they're footing 100% of that bill. So once again, there's a lot of data out there. We use it extensively. They're now asking us to contribute a little bit to the creation of that data.
Joni, can I do some clarification on the numbers, please? So the state is going to fund this, and then they just asked if the counties would contribute to the overall state effort? Or does this ensure that the county gets added to the effort being done on a statewide basis? Can you help me in, first of all, that? And then I did have a couple of follow-up before I open it up to the
President Meiser, it is my understanding that, definitely Scott County will be included in this.
Yep.
I can't say for sure exactly what the state's dollar value is for this whole effort and what Scott County, is in relation to other counties.
So if I'm going to try and understand how we all participate in this, and I'm supportive of securing this data, but I wasn't quite tracking. So does this mean if the county's contributing 58, then the WMO is contributing another 20K on top of that? So now it's at 78, plus then 5 from the 2 water organizations goes up to 88, and then the cities are also contributing? I was confused.
Okay, President Meiser, yeah, so the county has committed $58,000.
Yep.
Of that, so the Scott WMO is going to contribute 20 of the 58. So
There you
now
go.
they're down to
Okay.
a $38 gap that they're trying to fill. Then if the 2 watersheds each commit $5,000 each, that's then 30,000 of the 58,000.
And what about the cities? When you
I
talk about
do
the
not
cities,
believe that the cities are contributing. But once again, they're contributing annually to aerial photography,
which of course is different.
which is different, but it is something that we use on a
Yep.
frequent basis.
For data. Okay, fine. Thanks. I want to just sort of clear that up because I wasn't tracking it. Frank, I think you're next. And then
I see the report indicates that current comprehensive, is it Lidar? Is that how you
Lidar.
pronounce it? Lidar coverage is from 2003. So it's been a few years.
It is
How
very
good
outdated.
will this Lidar coverage be? Or how many years? Yeah, going forward. Any idea?
Manager Boyles, I can't tell you how long it will be until another flight occurs. Unless,
And one more question. Are these funds budgeted? I didn't see anything. for
these
this.
are not budgeted within the current watershed district budget.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Kurt, you're next.
Is the 5,000 a one-time fee?
It is a one-time ask to help fund this flyover and the creation of the LiDAR data.
Okay, it is. Can this be used towards tracking, mapping the outlet channel?
This data, this data will be able to help us on multiple levels in terms of topography, movement of sediment, and I believe Carl has something to add to this.
Yeah.
I would agree with Joni's statement. I was just going to add we can't predict when they're going to fly it again in the future, but for just reference, the last statewide LiDAR data set was 2011. So it's infrequent, but the landscape does change as a result of development and drainage patterns and such change, so getting these updates are important.
So Carl, how often has EOR mapped the outlet channel for us? Every year, every couple of years, or what?
There has been periodic updates since the last 2013 update of survey. LiDAR, one of its things that it doesn't do, obviously, is map the depth of water. So you have any water feature, at least you're adding bathymetry to, or in the case of the outlet channel, you're doing physical survey of the outlet channel. It doesn't necessarily pick up well those kind of smaller channels as well. So the overall model for PLOC, the SWIM model, though, the baseline of that for topography is the 2011 data set of LiDAR, and then supplemented by physical topographic survey to get those fine nuances.
Bruce?
Tony, I have to ask this question, but if we didn't support this 5,000, I'm all for it, but if we didn't, does that mean we don't get to use the data? Or, there's nothing in there that says what happens if we didn't support it.
Manager Loney, there would be nothing that would prohibit us from using the data, even if we did not contribute to it, because it would be out on the county.
Public data.
Right.
It is public data, but they're just asking,
They're just asking.
correct.
Okay.
Anybody else? Seeing none, go ahead, Bruce.
I'll make a motion to commit funding to Scott County in the amount of $5,000 for the Lidar project.
Second.
We have a motion on second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. Frank? I said aye. Okay, thank you. I didn't. Thank you, sir. Okay, we're on to the Lower Prior Lake Subwatershed 6 and 36 Retrofit Feasibility Study.
So as you know, this is one of two feasibility studies that you'll be seeing before end of year, needing to button these up before the grant deadlines are due and turning in those reports to the watershed-based funding partners that these are funded by. This one, Lower Prior Lake 636, really started back in 2011, or the catalyst was the 2011 Lower Prior Lake Diagnostic and Feasibility Implementation Plan study, which really was the district's, the purpose of that report and that study was to better guide management activities, BMP maintenance, and new potential practices that could be retrofitted into the Lower Prior Lake direct drainage area to help reduce the risk of having that lake tip into a impaired state as well. So again, trying to, even though it's not currently impaired, try to minimize the additional nutrients getting into the lake, collecting there, and hopefully keeping it off the impairment list. So that is where this originated from. And now you have up on screen kind of the direct drainage areas that go to Lower Prior Lake without going in another major receiving water body. For instance, like Little Prior Lake, and obviously anything coming through Spring Lake. And there's a color coding to those subwatersheds that you can see. There's green, there's some that are probably harder to see, and yellow, and then there's red ones. And the red ones were identified by that diagnostic study as not having adequate treatment or not treated up to what, say, a new development would be required to incorporate into their stormwater management plan. So that was the focus of that diagnostic study, is to just figure out where these areas were and then give some preliminary indications of what could be done. And then this feasibility study focused on the top right or eastern red blob, subwatersheds 6 and 36 as known in that diagnostic study. Because it was identified that it was not treated to current standards, not that it was required to, it was developed before that time, and B, the district had monitoring data right at that outlet point near my boat club that indicated that the discharge at that location was relatively high in terms of nutrient and sediment loading. So that's kind of the background for why this even came into place. When Maggie was on board, she saw this as a viable starting point for the first attempt for the district to get some of that watershed-based funding for feasibility studies. Real quickly, the study itself further refined the subwatersheds and assessed the landscape, and then went in both desktop and field work, investigated potential retrofits, and then either ruled them out or kept them into the feasibility study and then ranked them based on load reduction and estimated cost. And that's what I'm kind of going to go over from this point forward. Another thing that you'll see is quite quickly that red, if I go back, the red shape, and I can't point, but the one that the yellow arrow is pointing to is quite big, but then all of a sudden, when we started getting into this, there was two things going on. At the time, the city of Prior Lake didn't have their storm sewer mapped electronically. So the lower Prior Lake diagnostic had some assumptions in it. And two, the city, at the same time that that diagnostic study was being completed, came in with a road reconstruction project, and within Bowden's Park implemented an underground stormwater management practice that really effectively treated a large portion of this 636 study area. So once we got into this feasibility study, we basically set that aside. The district partially funded that practice in the park, and that area is effectively treated. The practice that is installed, Mike, maybe we were even on city council at the time back then. That was a Ross Bittner brainchild project and had reused storm sewer from a different city project to create storage under the park for holding it and then allowing it to bleed out slowly into the filtration pond to the west. So that was quite a great project of the city that the Watershed also partially funded. But no point in putting in additional BMPs. I mean, you could, but the pollutants that remain after coming through this treatment system are really hard to remove at a higher cost. So they would fall off quite quickly in the ranking from a cost benefit. The image on the right is probably a little hard to see, but the remaining 6 sub-watersheds, as we rename them for the purposes of this feasibility, were the focus of the study area. Within those 6 sub-watersheds, there are still additional smaller scale practices. There are a handful of rain gardens that went in with that road reconstruction project that I mentioned, as well as there were the existing NERP ponds, National Urban Runoff Program ponds that exist along Highway 13 on the west side, and then that large deep pond northwest of 42 and 13 that we wanted to take account into and make sure that we weren't just making the assumption from literature values for runoff of nutrients and pollutants from the landscape. We actually wanted to model how effective these features were, what the discharge would be from them, and then use that as the loads to any potential new practices. So in this this table, if you were to walk through it, all you're seeing here is each of the 6 sub-watersheds, its drainage area, direct and upstream that flows into it, the loading from landscape, and then the existing BMP removal efficiencies, both in terms of particulate and dissolved. That's the PP and the DP in this. And then those reduced loadings on the far right are what we carry forward for effectiveness on what could still be implemented in the landscape. So, what did we find? We saw 9 practices that were viable, that made sense, that had large enough drainage areas that you could get to them from a local scale near catch basins or retrofits of existing ponds. So there were 5 iron-enhanced sand filter benches identified as potential locations and 4 rain gardens, of which, getting into the details of the existing design of those basins, we did rule out the iron-enhanced sand filter in sub-watersheds 1 and 6 because of the relative separation from the high water level or the ordinary high water level of Prior Lake, and for the amount of elevation that we had from the bottom of the existing pond and storm sewer. In essence, they couldn't have worked from a gravity standpoint or would have be built in estimated groundwater elevation. So those are no longer, they were investigated but have been ruled out. So there's 7, if you break them apart to actual physical lake locations, practices that are still feasible. And taking a look at that, there's a cost range. So this table will show the amount of total phosphorus, kind of the far right of the, I don't know, peach-colored heading that shows you that the estimated annual TP removal from these practices, if you total them up, is on the order of 7 pounds per year. Relatively small in the overall scheme of things. Also predicated by the size of the drainage area is the largest, and the fact that there's existing features providing some level of treatment already, but not to today's standards. What you'll see in blue is taking a look at that estimated annual removal for a 25-year life cycle divided by the estimated total cost for construction and maintenance over that period. So a life cycle cost. The range that you see on these tables is really whether they were incorporated as a future road project or if they were one-off standalone projects. The lower cost being paired with road projects, you get to leverage the other unit and materials and already planned maintenance activities or will be planned in the future maintenance activities. Looking at these a little bit more, just from a map view, the red stars are the locations of those 7 practices. The western ones are the rain gardens. The eastern 3 along Highway 13 are the sand filters. And I will zoom in a little bit more here on next slides. So again, you can see this is kind of had to break this image apart to get the full study area on the screen, but those are 4 new practices on the west and then 3 retrofits, the sand iron filter benches on the right. Typical details, and again, locations. These are requirements of the feasibility study, promised deliverables, showing the location and typical design for the features of the rain gardens. And similarly, here's the 3 iron enhanced sand filter benches, and they're designed to make them work in that location. So, I guess, maybe not all the glamour and bells and whistles and huge load reductions. Hopefully that is, kept in mind with other projects, other feasibilities. You don't win with every investigation that you undertake, but hopefully with considering the other one that the district will be hearing soon kind of counterbalances what we're recommending now. Is that there's still viable projects here, but the district wouldn't actively pursue them. Have these brought to the city MnDOT attention. Remind them that active maintenance is needed now on these features. And when they pursue that maintenance, take great consideration to maybe having an active partner in enhancing them beyond maintenance, but not pursue them as your own individual projects. With that, any questions?
Thanks, Carl. I think you imagined some of the questions you might be getting. You already answered it. Some of these feasibility studies don't identify what we should be working on. This clearly seems to be in the scope of even us trying to protect Lower Pryor. This pales in comparison to even probably other projects. Actually, it was a question I was going to ask. Do we have any other list of potential projects for Lower Pryor? I know whatever we do for Upper probably protects a big volume, at least on what's coming from, the south. But do we have an idea? Because I know on the cost per pound of phosphorus, this is off the charts compared to the stuff we're doing for the rest of the watershed. So are there more cost-effective, larger opportunities to protect Lower?
In the scale of projects that has been investigated by the district, this is kind of middle of the road. The ones that have already been built include, Fish Point Park and then Sandpoint Park, the large-scale retrofits. Those were, again, also red areas or in some cases, kind of yellow areas of this diagnostic study that were considered and built in place and had much greater impacts.
Do you remember what the cost per pounds of phosphorus removed? I think that was the Sandpoint was like.
Yeah, I can't remember Fish Point, but Sandpoint Park was in the order of, did the back of the envelope calculation at about $500 per pound of removal.
Okay.
So some of these practices, if they're paired with a road reconstruction project or a maintenance activity, there's one that's down that range. The other on the low ends are in the $2,500
Right.
per pound removal.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else?
Well, Fish Point and Sandpoint were definitely the featured ones, so we got the most bang for our money. They're also the most visible for the public to see too. And this is a surprisingly low yield for the amount of money for phosphorus captured, as far as I'm concerned.
But it sounds like the recommendation also is to park this at this point. Clearly, it would be more cost effective, maybe even hit in the realm of some funding potentially later on when the road projects. Does this also mean that there could be some additional funding from those road source projects, and then we're just sort of contributing to enhance the water quality aspects of the project? Am I understanding that might be, did I get that nuance maybe, Carl?
Yeah, that would be my recommendation, is that you're not actively pursuing, but you're informing your partners of not only maintenance needs, but of potential enhancements.
Some enhancements, and we might support the enhancements, not to this scale, but some portion that would make that more cost effective in our own budget for the work that we're doing.
Correct.
Right? Yes? Okay.
What sort of road projects are you looking at down the road?
Well, MS4s are required to maintain their practices, so there should be some look by MnDOT of their ponds along this corridor. That's the main nod that I would be giving to MnDOT. The city of Prior Lake is more of a longer term, since these roads in this general area have all been rebuilt or rehabilitated within, not more than 10 years ago. So give it another 10 years for the city of Prior Lake roads, at least, before there's probably any major maintenance on those roads.
Bruce?
We need to get this done before the end of the year, or did I read that somewhere?
No. Or just accept the feasibility
Yeah.
study is what
Yep.
we need to do.
My understanding of the needs for action for the board is just really to accept this report so that the district can deliver on its obligations to the grant
Right.
partners and finalize the feasibility and turn it in, so to speak.
Do we know the amount of the grant that we got? Do we know what that is?
My recollection, it was a $20,000 grant, I think, on both of the first two.
And it was a 50/50 or grant? We had a match?
No, I think it was almost full funding.
Full funded?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Matt, any other questions?
No, I'm
Bruce,
going
did
to
you
make a
have any more?
motion.
Please do.
Motion to approve the Lower Prior Lake Subwatershed 6 and 36 retrofit feasibility study and authorize to share the report with the city of Prior Lake, Scott County, and MnDOT.
Second.
We have motion and second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Thanks, Carl. Thanks, gents. Okay, next item on our list is the Eagle View Second Edition Development Agreement and Conservation Easement.
President Meiser and managers. So Eagle View is located in the city of Savage, just pretty much a little bit to the east, on the other side of 13, of the area that we were just looking at for the 636 feasibility study. The district calls for, as part of our rules, when parcels redevelop, if there are water courses, wetlands on that parcel, our rules trigger that we should be then working with the developers to implement a buffer strip around these water resources, and then we place a permanent conservation easement to protect the buffer strip and the water resources. So this is really This proposal includes both a development agreement and the conservation easement in one package. Typically, the development agreement would come first, and then the conservation easement. But the Eagle View developers are moving quite rapidly. So the package includes both the development agreement and the conservation easement. And, district staff is just requesting that the Board of Managers approve the attached development agreement and conservation easement for execution by the district administrator and recording at the Scott County Land Records Office, based on the condition that any identified property encumbrances are resolved to the district's satisfaction. So I'm adding a caveat to the ask.
Okay. Thanks, Joni. Any questions, gents? Bruce?
I still have a question on the agreement on number 8. Costs and fees, the owner should reimburse the district for all costs incurred in preparation and review of this easement. And then it also talks about the owner should also reimburse the district for all costs related to the enforcement of this agreement. And I go, how long is that enforcement? I mean, the owner is going to be a developer and sell those properties, or is he still the owner of the property that easement's on?
The conservation easement is tied to the property, and it will stay with the property even if the property changes ownership. So it is a permanent easement, and district staff goes out typically on an annual basis to review the easements to ensure that they are being maintained in a manner that is in compliance with the established conservation easement.
Well, knowing what I know about development, that developer is not going to be the owner after a while. He's going to let it go tax forfeiture or whatever. But so the enforcement, I mean, this clause here about the owner will be responsible. The owner will be gone. And, or it'll be the property owners adjacent to it. I don't know who, that sentence there doesn't make sense to me.
Manager Loney, so once again, the future property owners, whoever buys this property, then becomes ultimately responsible for being in compliance with the easement. And we've had a number of situations where property has traded, has been sold. And that's one of the benefits of going out on an annual basis. We do quite a bit of a education process. So we send out postcards to all our easement holders in the spring, letting them know that they have an easement on their property and what's expected for them to be in compliance with it. Then we go out and inspect it. And then we send them, for those folks that we determine that they are out of compliance with the easements, we send them a letter at the end of the season letting them know that they are out of compliance and how to bring themselves back into compliance. And folks, there are some folks who are really resistant, but a lot of the folks are very willing to bring their property back into compliance. And so, it is an ongoing issue, but it's important that we do what we can to, once again, protect these valuable natural resources.
Okay. It just still seems confusing to me because the agreement talks about the owner, which is a development company, and you're saying the owner is also going to be reversed to district for all costs related to enforcement of this agreement. I'm saying the agreement goes on and on and on, and that owner is gone.
Let me also clarify. So yes, so we put together a development agreement first, and once that agreement's in place, that then is the mechanism that allows the district to charge back the property owner the costs that we're incurring to put together the conservation easement.
Okay, that I see. I'm talking about the enforcement then. Are we talking?
And so we're talking about the enforcement of creating the conservation easement.
Okay.
So can I do, let me see if I'm going to try and add something here, because I think, so if I understand this, the conservation easement, though, is on a piece of property that an individual homeowner will end up purchasing from the developer. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So Bruce, Did you hear that? Sorry, I was doing that.
My bad.
So it's the individual property owners that will end up buying the piece of property that the conservation easement's on. So they become the new property owner of the easement. So that's how the baton is passed. So there will be an owner. It's not a developer that gets removed, or it's on shared property or something that is then just left adrift. So individual property owners will own those, be responsible for those easements.
And this easement,
So I think
this easement document is married to that land. And they buy that property understanding that there is a conservation easement on it, if they've done their homework. Some of them are surprised that there is one. And we do have mechanisms in place that if they are not voluntarily bringing their property into compliance, we do have steps and protocol that we could literally go in and do the work ourselves and charge them back.
Okay, the agreement transfers over to
Yes, to the new owners.
the new owners, okay.
It's tied to the land itself. That's why we record it at the,
Somebody will always own the land.
Yeah, no, I understand that, it's just and Frank pointed out the duration clause here.
It's a little scary,
What's that?
the duration clause. It talks about the agreement terminating on the date the Watershed District provides formal written documentation that if the conservation easement has been planted and fully established in accordance with Exhibit B, meets all rule requirements, and that all reimbursable costs incurred by the district have been paid. At owner's request, the district shall execute notice of termination the owner may record on the site. It sounds like there is an end date of some sort. I want it to be what you're saying it is. That just makes me nervous. That
Manager Boyles, that really relates, that clause relates to the development agreement, not to the easement itself. So
The agreement goes.
you can, at the end, once the easement is in place and they have met all the requirements to get that easement successfully recorded, we can terminate the development agreement at that time. It does not, it doesn't cause any detriment to the ongoing conservation easement. The development agreement is really just in place as a mechanism to help us be compensated for the creation of the easement.
Good? Anybody else? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve this with the, what was it, with any, how'd you phrase that, Joni? Encumbrances or?
Based on the condition that any identified property encumbrances are resolved to the district's satisfaction.
There you go. Do we have a so moved?
So moved.
Excellent. Second?
Second?
We have motion and second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
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 That motion carries. Frank, did I miss a vote?
I
Aye. Thank you, sir. 5-0. All right, we're on to the next one, Joni. The Wise Edition Conservation Easement.
President Meiser and managers. So last month, we had a development agreement brought forward and approved by the Board of Managers for the Wise Edition. And that development agreement now has been recorded. So, and staff has done their due diligence, and no project encumbrances that affect the easement were identified. So we're now in the step of establishing our conservation easement. So district staff is requesting that the Board of Managers approve the attached conservation easement for execution by the district administrator and recording in the Scott County Land Records Office.
Plain and simple, clean one on this one, correct? Okay, any questions, gents? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries 5-0. Thanks, everybody. All right, we're on to manager presentation and liaison updates. Anybody have anything worth sharing from their liaison efforts? Kurt?
Well, through Sand Creek and Spring Lake Township, it appears that the final section of 282 is going to be open next week. That's the last mile that goes by the State Highway building, which will make it completely open going from Prior Lake to Jordan. Thank you.
Bruce, did you have something too, sir?
Yeah, the CAC meeting, we had a great presentation by Steve McComas of Earth Science, and touched upon a lot of topics that are about interest to our CAC members and even to the board. I think we could probably send that PowerPoint presentation to the board members if you didn't get it. So, but it was good. And the only other thing is, in the city of Shakopee, I mean, we did a nice tour, but in the city of Shakopee, they got a new development going. I think it's called Whispering, whatever it is.
Whispering Waters, Manager Lenny.
And that's where the Mullenhart property was, where we had a hard time getting easements. So we no longer have to worry about that because we got a big easement in there for that property. And also in the city of Shakopee, they approved a plan to provide an outlet for Quarry Lake, which is lower than our outlet channel, but the lake kept getting higher and higher, so they're going to be pumping water into that channel. Just a couple things of interest.
Great, thank you, sir. Anybody else? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Typically, again, these we approve these en masse, but I'm going to clarify, are there any items that any of my colleagues would like removed from the consent agenda? Bruce?
Yeah, I'd like to remove 5.5, the Sutton Lake Management Plan.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Anyone? Then I would entertain a motion to approve the amended consent agenda.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries 5-0. Thanks, everybody. Bruce, 5.5.
Yeah, I guess this is something I know we've talked about a long time ago. I'd like a better update on what I see here because I think there needs to be some explanation. I did talk to Carl a little bit before this meeting, and he's got a lot more updating on where we're at with the DNR, where we're at with the property owners, and the necessity of doing this improvement or this study or management plan now. So I would turn over to Carl to answer some of those questions. You know, where we're at with the property owners. We had some difference of opinion on when we could do the timeline of the drawdown, and DNR had some concerns. And Carl, maybe you can update everybody on what's going on now.
So the last action of the board was to approve the outlet structure and build the outlet structure with the possibility to be able to draw the lake down. At the time that we were developing final plans, we were also in discussions with DNR about what it would take in order to implement those temporary drawdowns. You know, from the district's perspective, the goal was to provide additional storage in advance of spring snowmelt. What we were hearing from the landowners at the time through all those open meetings with all of the landowners around Sutton Lake was that they maybe liked the idea of temporary drawdown, but that it should never come before the end of duck season. And so that was a pretty hard hurdle to get over moving forward with discussions with the Department of Natural Resources, because their concern was, well, if you draw the lake down too far into the season, i.e., you know, after duck season, you might end up freezing out some of the herptiles and other amphibians and stuff that go in and hibernate in the muds and soils around the lake, and you'd freeze them out solid and basically kill them off. So we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, and we didn't want to hold the district up from building the project, and so the project was built, and the DNR outlined a bunch of data that the district would have to collect and have be considered, and the district also authorized that collection of data, which occurred last summer and fall and then into the spring, and we completed a inventory, a natural resource inventory, which would be part of this. But as to Bruce's main question, where are we now with DNR and landowners? There has been a change, without really naming names or anything, but there has been a change by one of the primary landowners that has been involved with the district, that that hard and fast, not until after duck season, maybe is not as hard as it was once, and that and they would consider temporary drawdowns if the goal was to really restore the lake to what they remember it being in the past, which was not a narrow leaf hybrid cattail dominated water body, but that had more open water body and not other invasives like Phragmites coming in. And if that meant losing a year or 2 years or infrequent number of years of primer duck hunting season, that was something that they were actively interested in pursuing. So this study was planned, but we hadn't been really bringing it to the district's attention again for implementation until we kind of heard this new news from the landowner and we completed and had the inventory of the natural resources. The overall goal seems a lot more, from the district's perspective, of achieving more flood reduction potential seems more doable now that we have that needle moving a little bit with landowner, and it's moving in the direction of the Department of Natural Resources on what they'd want to hear in terms of when a drawdown would occur. So you've built it, but you don't have the procedural steps in place in order to ever do that lake drawdown. This is the plan that would have to be approved by the DNR in order to allow the district that flexibility of exercising drawdown, of which there are two primary, outlined in the scope of services, two primary rules and statutes that have to be followed, which will include public meetings and a public hearing in order for approval of a lake management plan. Ultimately, the DNR would be the approval entity, but you would need to demonstrate that the district has gone through all these steps in order to do that. So that's what the scope of work is in terms of compiling the data, meeting with the regulatory agencies, meeting with the landowners, setting those objectives that, you know, balance the interests of all involved, and hopefully, you know, also do something really good for the lake as well as provide flood reduction with some of the management activities that we're contemplating already just internally as we're writing this scope of work and doing some research on some of the management activities for this lake that would be likely applicable and that we want to discuss with everybody.
Bruce?
Yeah, and Carl, it sounds like then, I mean, having worked with the DNR, nothing's 100%. I mean, they still could always say no. But have you got an indication so far, if it sounds like doing this plan and meeting some of the requirements, that we have a, what would you say, 75, 85, 90% chance of approval? Or is it pretty much this is what they need to have in order to make the approval?
They would ultimately have to have a lake management planned or approved by the commissioner of DNR for temporary drawdowns to occur. Mm-hmm. So that's in rule and statute. Where that needle is in terms of what I think the chances of approval are much higher. You know, devil is in the details for what the ask is, how often, when. But now that we have at least the primary landowner saying that there is much greater flexibility in when that can occur, I think the chances, if we want to throw a percent on it, yeah, it's greater than 80% that we can get to a management plan that DNR will approve.
And I think I remember too, the public hearing is very important, that the public around the lake support it.
Correct.
That's one thing they're looking for, so.
Yep.
And one last question, Mr. Chair, is the $20,000 that's in the budget, maybe Joan?
25.
25? Oh, it says we had 20,000 in the budget. Was that in the planning and programming area? I don't know where that 20,000 was identified. Joni, do you know?
Manager Loney, I would have to believe that it was in the planning budget. I couldn't tell you exactly
That's
where
where I
it's.
thought
where
maybe
it
you wanted
is.
it from, I don't know. I didn't see anything in our budget that said 20,000 for this management plan, but
Would it have been part of the project itself, included in the Sutton Lake?
It could very well be a part of the Sutton Lake budget itself.
It's actually listed under water storage. So part of that project, it was just,
Oh, there it
It was
is.
line-
Yeah, 550.
okay, it is
Yep,
25,000,
yep.
there it is.
it was just line itemed in that, is my understanding.
Well, part of the Sutton Lake project then.
Right. Bruce, anything else? Carl, you made a comment. So you mentioned that the primary landowner was then interested in seeing potentially Sutton Lake also having more open water, if I understood that. My guess is this does not accomplish that. A lake management plan would not accomplish that, but am I wrong? Does it actually help in that process? So he's going to get more of what he once had with Sutton?
So one of the tools that we're contemplating would be the drawdown and the cutting of the cattails at a low enough level so that when the drawdown is, the low gate is closed, those would get flooded out.
Gotcha. That's it. That answers it.
And so it's kind of a 2-for-1. It adds to you're not going to get them all through that management technique, but some of them you will be able to, and that over time, then you're losing that vegetative mass and you're having more water storage. So it's kind of a
Win-win.
win-win. Yep.
I get it. Thanks. I didn't know that. Anybody else? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to approve the item 5.5 from the consent agenda, the Sutton Lake Management Plan.
I'll make a motion to approve the EOR scope of services for the Sutton Lake Management Plan.
Second?
We have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries 5-0. Thank you, gents. All right, we are on to the treasurer's report. Bruce, you're still on, sir.
Okay, but you can see from my treasurer's report that we still have a healthy reserve in our banks. We still have Old National Bank, Sterling Bank, and then Northland Securities. We're not getting much interest from Northland Securities yet, so I keep an eye on that and see if there's any possibility of getting more interest. CLA has also included a cash flow analysis for to the end of the year, and that again looks pretty healthy. The one thing I want to point out in my treasury report, which I worked with Laura on, we have restricted/assigned funds, and we have one assigned fund, which is Alum Internal Loading Fund. That's the way we're describing it now. And I did check, that is for the $230,000 of this year. And one of the things I know Chairman Meisers wants to know, can we make a upper watershed blueprint project assigned fund? But I got so far, I didn't get the final answer from CLA, but it sounds like we can. We can do that. So if we want to make an assign, whatever money we don't spend this year in the upper watershed, make that assigned so it's reserved, we can do that.
Great. Thanks, Bruce. Did you also explore with them then on just even our regular budgeting? Can we, since some of those monies we are accruing for
Yeah.
specific reasons, can we start showing those as being actual results and going into the assigned fund? Is that
I
acceptable?
didn't get to that answer yet. Couldn't get a hold of Chris.
It would certainly seem we could.
Well, I think there is some accounting,
Is there a
Joni, I think, knows this. I think they're accounting-wise, we can't do that.
Yes, CLA made the recommendation at our last workshop that towards the end of the year, we can show a transfer of certain funds to an assigned status so that at the end of the year, it looks like these funds have been expended or addressed in some manner, so it doesn't look like
As they were planned to be.
exactly.
Okay,
So
perfect.
that is something that we will plan to do either in November or December.
That works. I get it then. Okay, thank you. That's all I had, Bruce. Again, it was nice to see a bunch of this stuff tie out. I did do my little checks sometimes just to So I appreciate it. It's good to see this. Thank you, sir. Anybody else have anything for Bruce? Seeing none, we're moving on to the upcoming meeting event schedule. And all we have, Bruce, do you want to announce it since you're the liaison? Go for it.
Okay, our next CAC meeting will be Thursday, October 28th, from 6:30 to 8 o'clock at the Parkview Conference Room.
Thank you. Anything else we've forgotten? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion is second on the floor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries 5-0. Thanks, everybody. Good night.